shopping centre, the cleaners have to wear stab-proof vests in the UK. The cleaners that work in the shopping centre in the UK in Kent, and you've got to be thinking, what the hell? I thought the same thing as well when I heard about this news. Cleaners wearing stab-proof vests for safety. That's what it says on here on GB News. I don't know about Talk TV or CBL News or Sky News, but let's listen to what it's been said. Let's have a look at this. Crazy, isn't it? World's gone mad.
Cleaners at a shopping centre in Kent are being offered...
change.
Just a slight one. Cleaners at a shopping centre in Kent are being offered stab vests as part of their uniforms.
Yes, this comes as staff at Boots and Greggs have also been given body cameras and panic buttons.
Well, these measures have been taken due to a surge of attacks on workers in the retail industry.
This is truly shocking. Joining us is former Met Police detective Peter Blexley. I mean, to hear the headlines that even cleaners now at shopping centres are being offered stab vests to presumably avoid attack. Well, not to avoid attack, but if they are attacked, to save their lives. What have we come to?
Exactly. That's the question, isn't it? That this whole story begs. What has this once great nation come to? How much of a threat is a cleaner going to be to anybody as they tidy up the mess that lazy others leave behind? It is truly astonishing. But of course, it's just a progression. And this really, the rot with regards to retail crime started around about 2014 when the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill got passed. And in that bill was a bit that said any shoplifting under £250 cannot go to the higher court. In other words, cannot go to the Crown Court. So what the police then decided to interpret that as was basically, well, any shoplifting beneath £250 we won't really worry about. And consequently, there has been a drip, drip, drip of a lack of kind of authority on the streets, a lack of respect for shopkeepers, and a consequent huge, enormous increase in shoplifting and assaults on retail staff.
Peter, that's appalling. Do you blame the politicians for writing this legislation? Although I suppose the bill didn't say don't prosecute this, it just said don't do it in this particular court, do it in lower courts. Is it the problem of the politicians who passed that, or the police who interpreted it?
Primarily, I blame the police. They, of course, will say, well, this came in the midst of the decade of austerity and we had huge cuts to police numbers and we had to deploy our resources elsewhere. Well, do you know what? You reap what you sow. If you leave what some may regard as minor crimes, and believe you me, shoplifting is not a minor crime if you're a one-man, one-person band trying to run that local retail outlet. It is not a minor crime. When you turn your backs on that, when you turn your backs on the shopkeepers, whether they be corner shop or multinational corporation, this is what you get: increased lawlessness. And it goes way beyond shoplifting now because the police have surrendered the streets. And consequently, the criminals are in charge, and this and other violent crime is on the increase.
Yeah, as you say, because of this, whether you're a cleaner, a bus driver, a shopkeeper, any job really, you can potentially be at risk if you're out with the public.
Undoubtedly, we're all a bit more at risk now because policing abandoned the streets. I've given you their excuses earlier on, but now it's a different landscape. Yes, there are still problems with retaining police officers and recruiting them, but now surely has to be the time when policing, in one way or another, decides that it will regain the streets for the benefit of us all.
They should build the police forces up with the council tax that we can give to them. They can afford that sort of thing. So why don't they put it into that sort of thing? Council tax, build the police up, build the fire services up. Hospitals have their own agenda and things. Buildings is for the council tax that you pay for. The schools, the youth clubs that you build for your council tax, build more of them. It doesn't make no sense to me, and that's why the world's going the way it is. Who knows? that more people that work in shopping centres as cleaners may have to wear stab-proof vests. So next thing, bus drivers wearing stab-proof vests and fucking... It's just annoying the way the world's going for some people. And, you know, if you're a shopkeeper, you may have to wear a stab-proof vest. In America, you'd have a shotgun behind your desk or a bulletproof vest on. This is the UK. What a world we're living in. I mean, typical. Right. Let's
This is a shopping centre.
Let's have a look and see if I can find anything else on here that I can put on the TV. And there's not a great deal of stuff on. Never is it? You got to try and find things. Right, where's it gone? This may take a couple of minutes to try and find. Always looking for videos to talk about on show on here. Not easy. I'll talk about that, I think.
Should the public have to pay to go on tours of Buckingham Palace and Balmoral? It's time for tonight's head-to-head. Yeah, so for the first time, the royal family will open up Balmoral Castle to the paying public, with tickets for guided tours being sold for £100 a pop. Afternoon tea can be included for an extra 50 quid. Meanwhile, private areas of Buckingham Palace will also be open to the public for the first time, with new tours featuring the famous centre room, which leads out onto the palace balcony, that famous balcony. These tickets will set you back £75 per person. So, the monarchy is thought to have made around £140,000 from ticket sales already, with demand for Balmoral tickets crashing the website at one point. But many have been left perplexed by the price tags. And tonight I am asking, should the public have to pay to go on tours of royal palaces? Let me know your thoughts. GBViews at gbnews.com, at GBnews on Twitter. Go and vote in our poll. The results will follow shortly. But going head-to-head on this, our TV personality, Nicola McLean, and royal journalist, Sarah Louise Robertson. Thank you very much for joining me, both of you. Sarah, I'll start with you. Should we have to pay for this? Don't we already pay for them?
I don't understand why people have got a problem with this. Fundamentally, if you don't agree with it, just don't go. Don't pay the money. At the end of the day, people will pay in the hundreds to go to concerts at the O2 and other venues and think nothing of it. Theatre tickets are expensive these days. So really, actually, it's in line with what people would pay on average anyway to go to something that they wish to see. And just think of the sense of history, what you're getting for that £100 to go to Balmoral and walk in the footsteps of Queen Victoria, I think is incredible. But this is aimed really, I think, at an American and Japanese market. And American tourists have money to burn. So it's nothing to them. It's small change to them.
Well, actually, that brings me on to my next question. Nicola, look, I understand that you're against this, are you? What's your view?
Yeah, so personally, I don't think they should be opening up their sacred homes to the public. But if they want to, then I don't think that they should be charging them astronomical prices in this cost of living crisis when most people can't afford it. As you say, Sarah, it's for the history. So we shouldn't then be alienating people that do want to go for the history, because most people can't afford £100 to go and walk around and then £50 for some cucumber sandwiches. I mean, I'm not sure where they got that from. I could make them for a lot cheaper. But no, why don't we open it up? Why don't we open it up for free to schools to go around and have a look? You know, for me, I just don't think that there's many people that I know that could afford, as a family, afford to go and walk around Balmoral. Now, luckily, I wouldn't want to do that. For the people that do want to do that and can't afford it, it's a shame. If you're open a historical cultural site up, then it should be accessible to people. It's not like going to watch Beyonce, who charges a fortune. This is about our royal family that we do actually pay for.
Well, on that then, Sarah Louise, would you say Brits go free?
Yes, I think so. At the end of the day, the royal family generates from the royal collection 400 million a year back to the taxpayer. That's an incredible sum of money. And the sovereign grant, we only give them 93 million. So actually, King Charles is gifting over 75% of income back. And I think £100 I mean, afternoon tea at the Ritz down the road, £75. So if you look at it in that way, people will. If people have got the money, they will pay. I do see your point, Nicola.
That's the sad point, isn't it? People don't have the money, but no one has the sort of money.
Well,
so you know,
well, they've sold out, Nicola. This is the thing. I mean, you know, people do. Obviously, there's so much demand that they crashed the website for Balmoral.
Okay, they've sold out, but I guarantee you that there'll be lots of people that want to go that can't afford to go, but that are still having to pay their taxes. So, you know, they're making it a classes thing yet again.
It's a class issue.
No, I don't think it's a class issue, Nicola, because people actually can go, you can walk around the grounds for a lot less. I think it's around about £26, £30 to walk around the grounds. And you do see the ballroom.
Sorry, one at a time. I'll just stick with you, Sarah, and then I'll come back to you. Don't worry. So go on, Sarah.
Yes, sorry. So there is options. Obviously, the £100 and the £150 makes it a bit more of a selective process. If you have got that money, you get a lot more for that. But as I say, if you're wanting that experience, you will pay for it if you want it, and you will find the money. And to a lot of people these days, that's in keeping with what concerts and what other places charge. And we also have to look, as I said before, at what is being generated in terms of revenue for the tourism and the economy. It's millions and millions. They took over 70 million in tourism, which went to the British economy just 2 years ago. That's an incredible amount of money. Okay. It's not that King Charles is keeping it in his purse. It doesn't go to him. It's his private residence.
We'll park it there for now, and I'll come to you, Nicola, on this. And people do bang on about the royal family and say they're not accessible enough and they don't pay their own way.
But he's opening it up.
Right, Nicola. But this is a way of them definitely doing that, isn't it? I mean, they are literally opening up their own homes, and you know they're raising a bit of money.
They're opening their homes, as I say, for people that can afford it, and that's where I think it's sad. It's you know, if you are putting it down to a historical place to go and look, I think it should be open to everyone. You know, you don't go to the museums, and you know, you can only go in this room if you've got the money, but you have to stay in that room if you don't, and that's what it feels like. So you can go and walk around for £25 or whatever you said, but only if you've got the money can you go and walk around the other places. And I don't think that's right when taxpayers are paying their money and they can't, you know, with the cost of living crisis, people are like choosing heating and eating, let alone going to Balmoral.
I do accept your point, but to be honest, though, you do pay a little bit. You know, like the Tate Modern, people think that's free. I mean, I've had several shocking experiences in there, mostly because I think the art is naff and doesn't make sense. But you can pay more to go and see Yoko Ono's exhibit if you're a nutter, and you would have to pay to enter that, right? And so, you know, it does happen, Sarah. It's not that uncommon. The National Trust, some of their car parks are 16 quid a pop.
I just would like to say that the upkeep of the residences and palaces comes to the taxpayer of around about 500 million a year. However, 2.5 billion is generated back to us. So actually spending 500 million to get 2.5 billion back, that's a fantastic investment. You can't argue with those figures. They speak for themselves.
Let's cut to the core of this then, Nicola. Are you a fan of the royal family or not?
I'm not a royalist, no. I mean, I wouldn't be paying to go and look around myself. So, you know, I'm lucky that I won't need to find that money.
Yeah, and whereas you are, so maybe this is it, isn't it? It's just basically just like, look, if you are a massive royalist, you'll probably find 100 quid, and you might go, and you might want it. If not, then I suppose no one's holding a gun to your head. But both of you, thank you very much. Cracking head to head, as ever. That was Nicola McLean, TV personality, royal journalist Sarah Louise Robertson. Look, who do you agree with? All right. So should the public pay to tour the palaces? Richard on X says, this is not about the UK public, this is about tourists paying top dollar into the UK economy, all right? Jean says, if people have £100 to waste, then that's their business. Stacey says, it doesn't matter how much they charge. What matters is thousands of people silly enough to part with their money to visit. I pity humanity. I don't think I agree with that. I'd pay £100 to look around Balmoral. I mean, how often are you there? Maybe that's just me. Anyway, your verdict is now in. Let's find out, shall we? 68% of you think that the public should pay to tour our palaces. There we go. 32% of you say that we should not pay to tour our palaces.
Well, I don't know what to suggest about that. Let's see what else is on this TV. Just trying to find what else to put on. Right. Anything else to put on the TV?
So, am I the only person who feels that privacy is fast becoming resigned to history? Thanks to social media, not all of which is bad, by the way, we can now transmit or receive the minutiae of life's most banal, some would say private moments. Whether at home, on a beach, single or married, joyful or depressed, we can tell everyone about it at the touch of a button. For some, this is literally their job, and that's fine. That's within their control. But there are also rapidly emerging ways in which surveillance is not optional. We've had zero say in whether we consent to this minute-by-minute intrusion. And this week, the march towards biometric digital ID, that is mandatory surveillance with potential conditions attached, moved a step closer. We're already used to seeing our faces reflected back to us at self-service tills. Actually, I'm not. The first thing I do is stick a plastic bag over the camera. But from this week, some supermarkets will now be scanning your face with age identification AI technology if you wish to buy over 18 products. Apparently, it's going to remove altercations with law-flouting youngsters. Just another way of avoiding a difficult conversation and saying no to a child. Of course, it won't stop kids buying booze. They'll just send in an older teen, except there will no longer be someone at the till looking over their shoulder, suspecting that the law might be being broken. Let's not worry about the kids. Let's just outsource that to a computer. And then there's the data harvesting and the mobile phone surveillance that reads your mind, bringing up adverts for products you seem to sometimes merely think about. We've all accepted these intrusions with zero consideration of legal or even just socially agreed rules around their existence. Privacy has fast emerged as the most significant citizen protection issue in the global information economy. Of course, every industrial revolution has changed the relationship between the private and the public. Even leaving the home to work in a factory rather than plough your own fields altered that dynamic. Then the arrival of the camera and the printing press triggered similar moral panics about the risks of misinformation or mistaken identity. But now we are literally edging towards a digital tyranny. The traditional definition of privacy was drawn up in 1891 by two American lawyers, and it was the right to be let alone or freedom from interference or intrusion. How quaint. But after World War II, in the year that George Orwell wrote 1984, the UN Declaration of Human Rights stated no one should be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home or correspondence. We were doing quite well until 2016, when the American Patriot Act used the 9/11 disaster as a valid reason, some might say an excuse, to expand the government's legal rights to monitor phone and email communications, to keep us all safe, of course. But this fourth industrial revolution that we are in right now, launched as the Great Reset by King Charles, inevitably poses the most serious threats to our anonymity, our privacy, and our freedoms. When Labour Home Secretary David Blunkett tried to introduce ID cards to the UK in 2004, Boris Johnson said that it was a loss of liberty and that he would rather physically eat his card than present it for inspection. We were doing quite well. But of course, the pandemic changed everything. And in September 2020, the government announced that they were pressing ahead with a digital identity scheme so that we could securely prove who we were online. To keep us all safe, of course. Also now, though, for your convenience, at a time when nothing works and nothing is convenient. Blunkett is back on the propaganda trail, announcing that a biometric digital ID system which logs your eyeballs or facial features is the only way to solve the small boat crisis. And guess who's in line for the contract? Fujitsu, as they made such a good job of the post office scandal. The small boats move is very clever. Pick the topic that most incenses people and offer this as a handy solution. It might work. But I can't help thinking that illegal migrants wanting to be British citizens would line up to have their eyeballs scanned and registered as legit. But it will definitely compromise the liberty of us ordinary people, who will find all of our data and misdemeanors logged in a central database. Next step, conditions of freedom attached, be that carbon credits, calories consumed or parking fines unpaid. Plus, thanks to last week's Scottish Hate Crime Act, you can now add a fear of being dobbed in by someone sat at your own dinner table to your paranoia list. Make sure Grandad doesn't slip up with his terminology. If he can be deemed to be stirring up hate, his words could be logged even if it isn't deemed a crime. There are now an estimated 5 million CCTV cameras in the UK alone. Are they making your life more convenient? I'd say a hard no. Are you safer because there's a camera on every corner? Well, crime and conviction figures would prove not. So who is it all for? The illusion of safety and convenience is always about hiding the ambition to control.
Interesting.
This is
See what else is on the television. After all, it is a Friday. Trying to find things to put on is a bit of a pain sometimes. Damn, I just clicked on the wrong bloody thing. What was I on? That was I on. Clicked on the wrong bloody thing on the TV. Yeah, okay, put this on.
Now, farmers are up in arms. They're fuming after the Royal Society for the Protection of Cruelty to Animals, or the RSPCA, launched their rebrand. Now, this is to mark their 200th year.
Now, this video, which you can see here if you're watching television, this snippet compares cattle farming to stepping on snails. If you can see, there we go. And there's someone's just picked up a snail. Is this where is it?
I know he's looking after the snail, this
Looking
guy.
after the snail and putting it in a plant pot. How sweet.
So they're teaching everyone to be nice to the little snails, but they did have also someone stamping on the snails. So this is a sort of compare and contrast. So if you're a nice, caring person, you will obviously pick up the snail, put it in its little pot. And if you're a nasty, evil person, you'll stamp on it, which I quite agree with. But I think the issue is that farmers don't like it when their legitimate business and legitimate practice and something they've been doing for generations normally is compared with something that perhaps others would think is a bit trivial, like injuring a snail.
Quite. Well, shall we get the views of two very different sides to this argument? Today we're asking, is cattle farming animal cruelty? Delighted to be joined by farmer and broadcaster Gareth Wynne-Jones, who says the video left a lot of farmers really quite angry, and senior campaign manager at People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, Kate Werner, who believes the RSPCA actually isn't going far enough. Yeah. Well, my goodness. Let's start with you, Kate. Why aren't they going far enough?
Well, I mean, the message in this video is a positive one. All animals do deserve respect. They're living, feeding beings. They're not inanimate objects to be commodified.
Cardiff, Wales.
And, you know, true respect is not about abusing any animal for a burger or a pair of shoes. And if you agree with the sentiment in the video, the next logical step is to live in a way that causes the least harm possible to animals and go vegan. And of course, there's this misguided belief that some species are more important than others, which is species thinking. But it doesn't really matter if they are big or small, if they're feathered or finned, if they have 4 legs or 2 legs or no legs at all. You know, all animals feel pain, and they're all deserving of our respect and consideration.
Gareth, why are a lot of farmers angry with this video?
It's a pathetic advertising propaganda stunt again. And you know, pets make me laugh. 45,000 animals they killed last year. Yeah, domestic animals. At least my cows go into the food chain. They're kept happy, they're stable, and they go to feed people. Yeah, better and the RSPCA are a joke, really. They are trying to tar farmers again and get people to stop eating meat, drinking milk, which we've been doing for centuries. And let me tell you, as a farmer, PETA will never feed anybody. We are the people that feed you every day. And at this time of year, it's been very, very difficult. It's been wet and it's been very hard to get on the ground, and a lot of crops haven't got in. So we're going to need these animals feeding us in the future, because these are an intricate part of the whole ecosystem and the food system. So get into your steaks, get into your chickens, get into your eggs, get into your bacon. Don't listen to PETA.
Well, my goodness, Kate, you've got to come back on that.
Yeah, I mean, the same tired old arguments. Peter is working with farmers to move towards plant-based farming, so we are far from being against farmers. But the fact is that these days, animals on the vast majority of farms are kept and reared intensively. So, you know, chickens are kept by the thousands and thousands in windowless sheds on intensive farms. You know, they are featherless, they're miserable. Cows, no matter what type of farm they're on, they're separated from, their babies are separated from them. They cry out for days for each other because humans drink their milk.
Hey, how many farms are PETA working with then? How many farms are working with you?
Well, we're working with farmers, and we're seeing more and more farmers move away from animal farming and towards plant-based farming.
Gareth, do you know any farmers who are working with PETA?
Not any in Cloud Cuckoo Land that I know of. Not really. No. It's a joke, man. You know, these people say one thing, and they're murdering 45,000 animals, domestic animals last year. It's an absolute joke.
Gareth, what are you referring to there?
It's all about the money.
Gareth, what are you referring to there? The 45,000 domestic animals. What's that?
Just go online and see how many animals PETA killed in America. 45,000 in 2023.
So, Gareth is peddling misinformation here. PETA in the US runs a shelter of last resort. And what we do is we take in animals who are reaching the end of their lives. For any reason, they may be unadoptable, and in many cases, euthanasia is the kindest option for those animals. And actually,
45,000 of them
in the area will turn these animals away because they won't euthanize them. So PETA is offering, as I say, a last resort for many families whose animals are suffering.
And I think many families would think that that's a very, very noble service to offer. Is that all that different from what Gareth and many other farmers do?
Of course it's different, because we're talking about commodifying animals to consume them. You know, we want people to live in a way that causes as little harm as possible. And that means not eating animals, not wearing them, not using them for entertainment, you know, not torturing them in laboratories. There is no need to exploit animals in any of these ways. We're in 2024, you know.
Can I just come into that? Because these people have never fed anybody. I can tell you as a farmer, I know there'll be more lives lost for me to put my salad, my vegetables and my fruit on my table. I know that. I'm a farmer. If I kill one cow here, it's going to feed many families for many months. And that's the reality. Every single thing that you're putting on your plate, your vegan myth is a joke. Everything you're putting on your plate has a death toll. And the death toll is even bigger for your salads, your cereals and your fruits. That's a fact. Live with it.
Well, I'm afraid we have run out of time. Kate, we started with you. Gareth, we ended with you. But please do both come back. This is a debate that has not sadly been settled today on this.
No, I'm holding the phone at the same time as I'm filming. Sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge. Tend to find something else to put on. No, it's all right. Well, I've got to hold the phone up. Like,
Now, farm.
Hold on, I'll try and find this. All right.
Are up in arms. They're few.
Trying to find that.
Those brave men and women who put their lives on the line to keep us safe. The government is launching a plan which pledges to help veterans secure high-paid jobs after they leave the armed forces. Well, Rishi Sunak met veterans in London earlier today to launch the scheme, which will be backed by £2.1 million in new funding. Well, I'm joined now in our Westminster studio, delighted to say, by GB's reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie, welcome to the studio on this beautiful Friday afternoon. So the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, today setting out his tanks on Tories' lawns, making a big play on defence, 2.5% GDP, plus pledges to go nuclear. Rishi has also been out and about. What's his pledge?
Well, this £2.1 million is part of a new drive called Operation Prosper. And it's about connecting employers with veterans to secure them in new high-paid roles. There's not a lot of clarity on what that actually means, but they're talking about pathways and connecting businesses with veterans. In 2022, the government announced a national insurance tax relief for any company that employed veterans in their first role after service. We do know they're going to extend that deal to those employers to help bring more of that work to be done. But they're pointing about needing veterans to get into areas of work where they're not typically associated. And one of the industries they've listed is professional services. That's now one of the country's biggest exporters. Britain became the 4th largest exporter in the world this week, according to the UN, with professional services now making up £185 billion. So quite a significant drive from the government here. Labour, in reaction, have said the Shadow Veterans Minister Steve McCabe has said that this is a step in the right direction, not criticising the move, but he did say that it comes as the Tories have failed the veteran community for the last 14 years and pointed to them halving funding for veteran support. This comes on the back of several packages that the Veterans Minister, Johnny Mercer, has announced in the last few years. There was Operation Courage in 2021, which was a mental health support drive. 30,000 signed up for that. And last year, there was also Operation Fortitude, about ending veteran homelessness. And we attended one of their launch events in Aldershot when that came about. However, the government pledged to end veteran homelessness by the end of 2023. We certainly haven't achieved that, with figures actually rising on the last year.
Okay, Charlie Peters, an excellent summary as ever. Let's get now the thoughts of the former British Army officer Patrick Benham-Crosswell, who joins us. Patrick, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. So Rishi Sunak pledging £2.1 million today to help veterans find well-paid work. My question to you is simple. Is it enough, or is it too little too late?
I think it's there are about 50,000 people leave the armed forces every year, so £2.1 billion is 140 quid a head. Well, that doesn't change anything. I mean, it looks to me like the government trying to find a nice headline about a group who it rightly or wrongly views as being perhaps its natural supporters. Most veterans leave the armed forces with their skills very much in demand, and they move seamlessly into employment. There is a culture shock on the way things are done in the commercial world as opposed to the military, and that cuts both ways. You know, I mean, let's not forget that 25,000 servicemen at 15% last year were found to be living in substandard accommodation by housing inspectors. They, you know, there's not a huge problem for most veterans in getting employment, and indeed many firms, I won't reel off names, many firms actively seek them. And you find that, you know, you Google job for a veteran. Separately, is Operation Courage, the veterans who are either suffering mental health issues or obviously being disabled as a result of combat, yes, of course they need help. Operation Courage, I think, got 18 million over 3 years. Another 2 million in there might have been a better idea, but that wouldn't be such a good headline.
Do you think that part of the issue is that we seem to be crying out for the skills that veterans can offer, but not just in areas that, you know, like tech and all the rest of it, but what about like police officers? I mean, the discipline, the physical fitness that veterans bring, they'd be excellent police officers, and yet now we seem to place so much kind of prowess upon academic qualifications.
I mean, there's always you know, the mismatch between military qualifications which can be quite narrow, and those in the wider community. But there are a number of armed forces veterans in most of the services, be it the police, the medics, fire service. You know, these are capable guys, and they don't necessarily want to take a job that comes with perhaps the stress of being a policeman. Not a job I would ever want. I think we're living in a world of gesture politics, and I think that's impacting adversely on policy across the board. I mean, your earlier piece on the Farage Portland bill, £54,000 a year as an illegal immigrant, or 140 quid a year to get a job. Get a job for a veteran. Where are the priorities there?
Yeah, I think that will resonate with a lot of people. Thanks for joining us on the show. And that's former British Army officer Patrick Benham Crosswell. Thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure.
99 to find something else. I'll try and find some more things.
Those brave men and women who put their lives on the line to keep us safe.
To be brave these days. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum. Is that a Great Escape? Bum, 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 bum. Boom, 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 boom.
Government has launched.
UK must prepare to get for war. What am I doing? Ooh, what am I doing? Ooh, what am I doing? Ooh. Why don't they show more war things? They did it a couple of months ago. They need to bring more war things back. Like this. This is 1 year ago.
Russia is not going to win, but Ukraine...
That's an old one, 3 weeks ago. 2 months ago. Ah, 4 days ago.
The outgoing Defence Minister, James Heappey, has slammed the government's defence policy, arguing that some in government are just hoping threats to the UK will simply go away.
Well, meanwhile, Heappey called on ministers to do more to get ready for conflict, saying the UK has failed to prepare for war.
Well, the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannett, joins us now. Thank you so much for making the time for us this morning. Frankly, what are the risks that the United Kingdom potentially faces right now?
Well, I think the issue that James Heappey highlighted and Ben Wallace supported, and indeed Lord Sedwell also had an interesting piece in The Independent yesterday. But what they're all pointing up, and many of us have been saying this for a while, is that looking at the situation in Europe, the security situation in Europe, with Russia's aggression against Ukraine being the predominant factor at the present moment, it makes sense for a country like ourselves to think about the worst, to prepare for the worst, to make sure that we're in a good place if the worst should happen. Now, none of us want the worst should happen, and by the worst, I mean getting involved in a war. And the issue that James Heappey was pointing out was that the Ministry of Defence alone was the only government department, he said, that was taking preparations for potential conflict seriously. And he highlighted the fact that a major exercise had been planned a little while ago, which all government departments were required, or should have been required, to take part in, to test the country's procedures for how to respond in the event of a major crisis and attack. And other government departments just failed to turn up. And he perfectly reasonably said that this actually indicated that we're not taking these things sufficiently seriously.
Yeah, and it sort of begs the question, doesn't it, whether we've learnt the lessons of COVID, when we heard all of the sort of preparations for a pandemic had been almost sort of ignored for a while by successive governments, and here we are talking about all these threats around the world, and are the government making those preparations that we deserve as citizens? And to hear from you sharing those concerns, I suppose adds weight to that. I mean, how alarmed should we be? Is this rectifiable? Do you think that the government's taking this seriously now? Do you think that Lord Cameron, as our Foreign Secretary, has a role to play in all of this as well?
well, we'd be worried, we should be worried, if the government didn't respond to these criticisms and didn't rise to the challenge. Now, what this needs, and currently, without being unreasonable about it, it shows a failure of leadership. If there are potential crises, you mentioned COVID, and of course, that was something we had to struggle our way through, and leadership there was pretty iffy at times. But if you look at the worst outcome of Russia's aggression in Ukraine, if Russia should prevail against Ukraine, and then Russia should push against other NATO countries, we could find ourselves in a very serious set of circumstances here in this country. But what it needs is for number 10, the Prime Minister of the day, to absolutely crack the whip across government and say, right, back in the Cold War years, we had good plans in this country to know how we would respond in a crisis. We've got a well-constructed government control bunker. We need to exercise this. We need to get what's called the war book refreshed and sorted out again, and make sure that we're serving the people of our country properly by having right across government, right across all government departments, proper plans from central government down to local government to reassure the people that if the worst comes to the worst, we know how to respond. And part of that, of course, and you probably know what I'm going to say next, is we need to increase our spending on our defence. And that means increasing the defence budget from 2.2% to 2.5% to 3%. And some would even say, and I would echo that,
look,
going up to 4%.
my laces are not tied.
In
my boots.
To make sure that we're properly looking after the defence and the infrastructure of this country, to make sure that we can look after the people of this country. I'm going to
go to the shop later.
You mentioned the Cold War, and thank goodness it did not turn hot. Perhaps one of the reasons it didn't was this policy pursued by Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher of peace through strength. The very fact of having the capability to fight a war, warding off the prospect of war itself. It seems like we've entered into a different paradigm now, whereby both major parties in the United Kingdom are almost pursuing the opposite policy, ignoring the need for a strong military. Would that be your assessment?
Tom, I think you described it perfectly well. The reason why the Cold War never turned hot was because we increased our defence capability, both nuclear and conventional capability, particularly during the 1980s, as you pointed quite correctly to the leadership of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher.
Talking remote.
To the point that,
hello, I am a speaking controller.
Realised that they couldn't compete.
I am a remote speaking
the Cold War ended satisfactorily. I'd also say we were spending between 4 and 5% of GDP at that time. And although that sounds like an awful lot of money...
Walking, running, bottle, going through the stream. Look at me, I'm a black currant.
We spent less than 3%
raspberry, velvet water.
When war broke out, because appeasement failed,
water time.
in 1939,
water.
that had shot up to 18%.
It's water time, must be.
When we were fighting for our lives, it was 46%. That's the disastrous price of fighting a war. What we have to do is pay the premium to deter war.
Pay the premium, it's not Netflix or Amazon videos.
About 3 or 4% of GDP. That's what
or
we
Disney,
should
pay the premium.
It needs leadership.
Netflix.
In across the country to get the government to act cohesively. And I'm afraid whoever is Prime Minister this time next year needs to realise there are serious issues on the international horizon. That should be his or her top priority.
Yeah. I'm so pleased you're on the programme because, I mean, I've quoted those articles that you're referring to ministers on this programme multiple times, these linkages that you made to sort of pre-Second World War and the Cold War as well. And they always come back. And in fact, we had Mel Stride, the Department for Work and Pension Secretary of State a moment ago, saying the exact same thing. We've got record spending in defence, higher than ever. We're spending more now than ever, higher than, and I just wanted to get your response to what, you know, when I give them your argument, that's what they come back at me with. What would you like to say in response to that?
Well, if you're just looking at the sort of the cash, then of course they're absolutely right. But 20 years ago, things were a lot cheaper, and now the price of everything has gone up. And the price of defence equipment has gone up. So to just rely on saying, well, 50 billion is the maximum we've ever spent in recent times, of course that is absolutely right. But you have to come back to the issue of proportion of GDP. We're spending 2.2% at the present moment, and I've already made the case that we bought peace through the Cold War at 4 to 5% of GDP. Those are the sort of figures we should be looking at. Now, of course, people can point to waste and to poor spending in defence procurement, and that is something that the government has got to bear down on. The Public Accounts Committee have criticised the MOD, and the Defence Select Committee have criticised the MOD. So the MOD can be
I had a pot noodle today.
At the way it spends the money it's given.
See, chicken and
but
mushroom.
The fact of the matter is that quantum,
pot noodle,
in proportionate terms, is not sufficient to guarantee the security
medieval
that
shield.
this country deserve.
I was on the bloody TV. Ooh, the TV. I wear my T-shirts of the Punisher. Ooh, I say. That's what I say about that now. I went, ooh.
The outgoing defence minister.
Wanted to show more war on here today.
Whoosh! 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 Whoosh!
Tesco whoosh. Store to door from as little as 20 minutes, because going to the shops isn't everyone's bag.
The Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff, Sir Rob McGowan, has told the government that Britain urgently needs more money for munitions, as well as for an integrated air and missile defence system to protect us from attack from the skies. He said to MPs on the Defence Select Committee, the amount of money we are spending on munitions at the moment does not meet in all areas the threats that we face. I'm joined now by the former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff, Lieutenant General Sir Simon Mail. Sir Simon, very good to have you here.
Hello, Andrew, good evening.
This sounds very, very alarming that we literally don't have the shells that we need if we had to go to war.
Well, it is alarming. Of course, it's in the context of precisely your last two items. Demands on health service, demands on, balance on pensions. But the reality is we took a very big risk, I suppose, of what I describe as a sort of holiday from history at the end of the Cold War. We then went into a number of operations and campaigns that were actually quite undemanding in some ways on large ammunition stocks. So we ran them down, and we're now facing a new reality that despite cyber, drones, precision attack, all the others, we do see the requirement, I'm afraid, for massed artillery, which the Russians and Ukrainians are having that slogging now.
Ukraine absolutely reminds of that, and the Russians have kind of retooled a lot of their industries to provide more shells, and we in the West have done so less. Have we actually given the Ukrainians too many of our own shells? We don't have enough left for ourselves?
Well, there's no doubt about that. That is one of the problems, that all the stockpiles that the Germans, the French, ourselves, some of the Eastern European countries have been diverted to support the Ukrainians. And dare I say, the Americans, who are also big in supporting, have diverted a lot of their holdings to go to the Israeli Defense Forces. So we had quite low stocks by historical terms, and they're a bit more depleted since then.
And I guess a shell it's a lot more than just a lump of metal. How easy is it to replace shells?
Not easy, because you need a production line that really only produces shells.
And we don't make our own, do we?
We do it in consortium, and we used to. The Royal Ordnance were big. The other thing about the Russians, of course, is their quality standards are so low, and there's masses of dud shells being fired in a way that, of course, Western ammunition stocks are that much more expensive because of the quality control. But it is quite difficult to ramp it up, although undoubtedly there are some European initiatives, and the Czechs have been particularly...
They've done very well, haven't they, in supplying
and pushing for a sort of European-wide response up in the ammunition production.
The other thing that your successor raised was the lack of an integrated air and missile defence system. And this will alarm people, because we know a lot of countries do have them. The Poles have got something a bit like that, and Ukraine's been putting money in. We've had Iron Dome for a long time, and the Russians too, but we don't. Is that a really big glaring gap in our defence?
Well, again, there's a national issue that we don't have much, and then there's a coalition issue. We're going to assume, if we were, God forbid, to go to war, it would be within NATO. But the explosion in the use of drones, of course, has made the air threat that much bigger than when it was bombers and fighters. And we've seen in the Red Sea, Sea Viper and the like, Patriot missiles, very well known, hugely expensive. And the sort of what they call shooter sensor is very complex. and the command control.
So how well protected are places like London and Glasgow and Manchester from those kinds of threats?
Well, we don't really have a security plan that sees that, but we do see it after 9/11. Combat air patrols up, and we did see it during the Olympics when we had air defence situated on a number of buildings, not with a huge hoo-ha.
Sure.
So we have the capacity, undoubtedly, and it is part of the defence thing, but it needs to be integrated continent-wide in the sort of...
Undoubtedly. What do we do on here? Undoubtedly.
I was one of the candidates to become the new manager. I had a strong belief that I was going to impact the club and the team.
Undoubtedly, undoubtedly.
And not act fear. And once that happens, then there are no limits.
If France puts troops on the ground, they'll be slaughtered. If Britain puts troops on the ground, they'll be slaughtered. If the Americans deployed an expeditionary force of a couple of 100,000 men, they would be slaughtered. The Russians are winning this war. The war's effectively won. They captured Avdiivka. Avdiivka has been fortified by the Ukrainians since 2014. They blasted their way through it. The Ukrainians can't form another defensive line. Ukrainian brigade strengths are about 30%. We're being lied to on a massive scale about what's going on there. And we've also been lied to about the capability of our own armed forces. Our armed forces would be worse prepared for this war than we were in 1940. The nature of war has changed. If you can see something on the battlefield, you can destroy it. And the fact is, that's what's happening. That's why the Ukrainians are losing. They're fighting magnificently. But Britain, no NATO forces have adequate air defences. They don't have the numbers. They don't have the artillery superiority. And they don't have the industrial base to support them, as your expert said earlier. It would be a disaster of a monumental scale. And if we do commit troops, that will be an invitation not to Putin, who doesn't want to expand the war, because why try to control territories that will be hostile to you? But it will be a temptation to others in Russia who will say, we are strong, the West has proven itself weak. It's a very dangerous thing that Macron is suggesting.
When you talk about they'll be slaughtered, they'll be slaughtered, they'll be slaughtered, I'm just looking here at, and again, these figures are never definitive, but all of the statistics I can come across from various different organizations suggest that Russia has lost more troops than Ukraine.
That's not true, and you can tell it's not true. Shall I tell you how you can tell it's not true? Because you can literally see the graveyards from space. Earlier this year, the Ukrainians started to organise new graveyards that would be capable of having 1.5 million graves. They've lost at least 500,000 dead or missing. And that's more than their army was fully mobilised in 2022. This is effectively the third Ukrainian army. And they lost tens of thousands of troops in their summer offensive.
So you're saying that Russia just has a better army than better forces than both ammunition and people than the combined forces of Western Europe and the United States?
Yes, they do. The Americans have always relied on the fact that they have air superiority. They control the air. That would not be the case in Ukraine. The MiG-31 has an air-to-air missile, as the Ukrainians know to their cost, that can shoot planes down from 200 miles away. We have no equivalent to that. Airfields, all our aircraft require, long airfields to operate from. The Russians have hundreds of ballistic missiles that can hit a target within 5 meters. You need the capability of destroying missiles, destroying drones, and destroying aircraft with air defense. And NATO is notoriously weak in this area. There were 2 Patriot launchers destroyed earlier last week. They were destroyed by a ballistic missile. You couldn't do this 20 years ago. It was impossible. Missiles weren't that accurate. if you look at the battlefield footage that you see, you'll see 4 or 5 guys running, because if you have a concentration of more troops, then either side will use artillery. And artillery in every war since 1914 has killed 80% of the casualties. The Russians have 10 times as much artillery, and they have 10 times as many artillery rounds. The Americans have one factory that makes artillery rounds. It will take them, it's going to take them till 2025 to manufacture more than 500,000 rounds. And the Russians are firing 10,000 rounds a day. That's why the Ukrainians are losing.
So why are they bothering?
Not prepared for it. Because too many politicians have put too much into this, and there's been too many lies told. And to be honest, there are British troops on the ground. The SAS, I'm certain, is there, because they've been planning lots of the attacks against the Black Sea Fleet. The French are there. The French lost 50 mercenaries, so-called mercenaries, in a missile strike last week. We're not being told the truth about this, and as I say,
hang on, you've had a full speech, Simon. If I could just come in, you've said a huge number of things there, so do let me speak. You have painted a picture of if America is still the world superpower. I mean, I know there's seismic shifts are happening on that front, but you've painted a picture of a superpower that would be knocked out in days by Russia. And Russia so far has not been able to knock out Ukraine in 2 years.
Because if you're going to do that, you have to lose large numbers of troops. Taking
the picture you've painted is that it's an impossibility.
It's an impossibility for the US to deploy troops that will be adequately protected in Europe. It would take months.
And why is their Air Force intrinsically, piffling compared to Russia's, in your view?
In terms of the conventional aspects of their force, the non-F-35, F-22 aspects of their force, they would find it impossible to operate over the battlefield. The stealth aircraft could operate, but even they will be vulnerable.
What do you think?
The Russians have the most sophisticated air defences in the world. They spend a lot of money on it.
Okay, thanks very much, Simon.
We've got a lot of problems. It's been going on 2+ years now, and I don't know whether any of us expected it. And from the beginning, I was for and didn't know how long it was going to last, whether it's 3 months or whatever, and try and help them as much as we can. But this is just going to drag on and on and on. And can we afford to get drawn into a war with Russia, the whole of Europe, or the whole of NATO get drawn into it, and then the Chinese get involved, the Americans get involved? We've caused enough problems around the world trying to solve other people's problems, thinking that...
But these aren't other people's problems, are they? Don't you think an emboldened Putin who has taken Ukraine or chunks of it is a problem for us?
Of course, it's a problem for us, but we can't solve it by going to war. What will war solve if we go to war? What is it solving?
Ooh,
you know what I mean?
I don't know.
Why have we waited 2 years for all of a sudden think, oh, we're going to go in? You know, we've put all these embargoes in place against Russian oligarchs.
I think that's...
And yet they're still...
No, hang on.
Where are they getting their equipment from? Right. We're talking about them running out of equipment.
I know, but hang on a sec. Saying that, why all of a sudden after 2 years are we saying go in? We're not saying go in. Macron has just raised the issue. He's raised the flag, I guess. But right from the beginning, it's been a question of, right, we will support you, but from afar. You know, but there was always hanging over that was, if this doesn't work, what? What then?
Yeah, I'm not clever enough to know what goes off in the background. Surely there's got to be conversations and whatever, but he's not wilting, Putin, unfortunately. He is not wilting.
Neither are Ukraine.
Well, they won't do, because they're getting bankrolled, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Well, they've been invaded, and they'd like their country back.
Listen, I totally 100% get that, and I'm not at all a Putin supporter. But how can the rest of Europe keep
funding it. You know, that's my argument. We can't just keep throwing money after money with nothing happening. Why would we just keep throwing money into a bottomless pit and nothing's changing? That's my case. So something has got to stop. You know, what I mean, we can't. We have to get around the table and say, what is it we're after? And again,
and if Putin says the whole of Ukraine.
He doesn't say that though, does he? Again, I'm not massively.
I don't know. He hasn't been round the table. He hasn't been round the table yet.
It was the Donbass and all that sort of region, and I don't know enough about the history of it, and I'm not here to say, I know all this, the Ukraine-Russian politics. But
you're just saying talk, not war.
Exactly that. We can't go to war. Look what we did in Iraq and.
It's a very different situation, John. It really is a very different situation. And to bring it back to Macron and what he has said, I mean, you know, he's known to have a bit of an ego on him. He's talked about, you know, he's really trying to position himself as, you know, post Angela Merkel, the big guy in Europe. Is that partly at play here, do you think?
I think Macron, as you say, Macron has got a very big ego. And so ego is
on air.
He's also a very smart guy. And perhaps we should give him a little bit of credit for the journey, because he's actually realised that what he said 2 years ago just doesn't apply now. And I think in that sense, he's always been a strategic thinker, and recognising the consequences for Europe of losing in Ukraine is, I think, is a smart move. It's a more imaginative move than some people who are still, if you like, trying to triangulate on a rather narrow basis.
And you've reminded me actually earlier on in our conversation about the talks that he had and the meetings that he had at the very beginning of all of this with Putin on that very long white table, because it was still COVID-y times, wasn't it? He's essentially, if you can at a table that long, seen the whites of his eyes and found him wanting, has he?
I think so. I think what you've seen, there is actually, although we keep trying to deny it, there's a consistency in what Putin has said about Ukraine, which actually goes back to 2008. What we didn't realise was not just that he meant it, but that he was going to act in the way he did. There is an absolute iron rod consistency.
You just don't believe it. Anyway, I better end the video. Thank you for all joining me, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy, peace. Been a pleasure. See you later. I'll be back again, don't worry.